The year is 213 BC. You are standing on the deck of a massive Roman warship, feeling the gentle rock of the Mediterranean Sea. Beside you, the legendary Roman General Marcus Claudius Marcellus smiles with supreme confidence. He commands an unstoppable fleet of dozens of warships and thousands of battle-hardened legionnaires. His target is the wealthy island city of Syracuse. For the mighty Roman Empire, this siege is supposed to be a quick, minor inconvenience. This small island, they believe, will be crushed in a matter of days. But Marcellus is dead wrong. He has no idea that waiting for his mighty fleet is not a sprawling, massive army. Waiting for them is a 74-year-old man, a man who does not hold a sword, a shield, or a spear. Instead, this man wields the laws of mathematics and physics to turn his city into a terrifying, impenetrable fortress. That man is Archimedes. And this is the story of how a single mathematician unleashed such unimaginable horrors that he single-handedly held off the greatest military empire in the world. How Archimedes' mathematical weapons destroyed the Roman army. Before we dive into blood and the fire, you need to understand exactly who Archimedes was and why his mind was considered a weapon of mass destruction. If Pythagoras was a mystical cult leader obsessed with the divine nature of numbers, and Thales was a wandering philosopher gazing at the stars, Archimedes was history's very first true mad scientist. He was born around 287 BC in the thriving Greek city-state of Syracuse, located on the island of Sicily. This was a man who lived and breathed mathematics. He was so completely absorbed by the abstract world of geometry that he would often forget to eat, drink, or even bathe. Legend has it that he would sit by the fire and draw geometric figures in the ashes, or even trace complex equations onto his own skin after being forcefully rubbed with olive oil by his servants. This is the man who famously ran completely naked to the streets of Syracuse shouting Eureka after discovering the principle of buoyancy while stepping into his bathtub. This is the unparalleled genius who grasped the mechanics of the universe so deeply that he boldly declared as king, "Give me a place to stand, and I shall move the earth." King Hiero II of Syracuse knew exactly what his brilliant friend was capable of. For decades, Hiero had maintained a fragile peace with the mighty Roman Republic. Syracuse was a wealthy, strategic jewel in the Mediterranean, a crucial prize in the brutal, ongoing wars between Rome and Carthage. Hiero knew that eventually the Romans would come knocking. He begged Archimedes to turn his unparalleled mind away from pure geometry and design defensive weapons for the city. For Archimedes, these engines of war were initially just a side hobby. He viewed engineering as a lesser, manual labor, a mere toy compared to the pure, elegant, and divine beauty of abstract mathematics. But when the king pleaded, Archimedes obliged. He spent years quietly fortifying the city, calculating angles, leveraging weights, and designing defensive systems that no one had ever seen before. When King Hiero died and Syracuse ultimately rebelled against Rome, the Roman Senate dispatched General Marcellus with a terrifying force to crush the uprising. When the Roman ships finally arrived at their shores, Archimedes' mathematical toys became the ultimate weapons of mass destruction. As General Marcellus's massive fleet approached the towering sea walls of Syracuse, the Roman soldiers were brimming with confidence. They were the masters of the Mediterranean, the conquerors of the known world. Marcellus deployed his ultimate siege weapon to strike the first fatal blow. It was called the Sambuca, named after a musical instrument because of its shape. This was a colossal, floating siege tower mounted on top of two massive, lashed-together warships. The Sambuca was a marvel of ancient engineering, designed to be rowed right up to the city walls and then drop a massive, heavily armored bridge directly onto the battlements. It was terrifying, imposing, and seemingly unstoppable. The Roman legionnaires cheered, banged their sword against their shields, and chanted as they rode this mechanical monster forward, anticipating a glorious, bloody slaughter. But high up on the stone walls, Archimedes simply smiled, adjusted his calculations, and applied a little math. Suddenly, the bright, clear Mediterranean sky darkened entirely. It was not a sudden storm rolling in from the sea. It was a torrential rain of massive boulders, some weighing up to 600 pounds, hurtling through the air with terrifying, calculated precision. Now, catapults were not a new invention in the ancient world. They had been used for centuries. But Archimedes did not just build standard catapults. He mathematically perfected them, using his profound understanding of levers, tension, torsion, and parabolic trajectories. He calibrated these wooden machines to fire at highly variable, perfectly precise ranges. Before Archimedes, artillery was mostly a game of guesswork and luck. You aimed, fired, and hoped you hit the target. Archimedes turned artillery into an exact science. He essentially invented the concept of adjustable, precision-guided artillery. The heavy boulders smashed into the Roman ships with devastating force, splintering thick wooden hulls like fragile twigs and crushing armored men in an instant. The mighty Sambuca was struck repeatedly, its massive frame shattering under the relentless mathematical bombardment. General Marcellus, realizing the extreme danger of keeping his fleet at a distance where they were sitting ducks, ordered his ships to rush the walls. He assumed that if they got close enough, the massive catapults would simply overshoot them, as they could not aim sharply downward. It was a logical, sound military tactic that had worked 100 times before, but it was exactly what Archimedes wanted him to do. As the Roman ships hugged the walls to escape the heavy boulders, a second tier of carefully concealed artillery opened fire. Archimedes had designed smaller, highly maneuverable catapults and mechanical scorpions that fired a relentless, blinding hail of iron darts, heavy javelins, and smaller, jagged rocks at point-blank range. Every angle, every blind spot had been calculated. No matter where the Romans positioned their ships, far away, mid-range, or right against a wall, they were trapped inside Archimedes' meticulously calculated kill zones. The Roman fleet was being systematically dismantled by geometry. But the true mind-bending nightmare for the Roman sailors was yet to come. Some Roman ships managed to survive the brutal barrage and finally reached the base of the seawall. The surviving soldiers prepared their ladders, thinking the worst was finally over. Then, a massive shadow fell over them. From behind the high stone walls, a giant wooden crane swung out over the sea, equipped with a heavy, terrifying iron hook at the very end. History would remember this nightmare as the Claw of Archimedes. The iron hook dropped with violent crash, smashing into the wooden bow of a Roman warship and biting deep into the hull. Inside the city walls, a team of oxen or soldiers began pulling on a complex, hidden system of pulleys. Archimedes had completely mastered the law of the lever, and here he weaponized it. The mechanical advantage provided by his pulleys multiplied the pulling force exponentially. Slowly, incredibly, the massive Roman warship was lifted vertically out of the water. Imagine the sheer, mind-bending terror of those Roman soldiers. They knew absolutely nothing of physics, mechanics, or fulcrums. They only saw a demonic iron hand reaching from the sky, lifting their multi-ton ship in the air like a child's bath toy. Once the ship was dangling vertically, spilling screaming men into the sea, the mechanism was suddenly released. The ship plummeted back into the sea, plunging so deep that it immediately flooded and sank, dragging its crew to the dark bottom of the Mediterranean. Panic spread like wildfire through the ranks. The Roman soldiers were so traumatized that if they even saw a piece of rope or a wooden beam hanging over the wall, they would abandon ship and flee in terror. General Marcellus was forced to retreat, bitterly complaining that Archimedes was using his ships to ladle water from the sea. If the Iron Claw sounds like fantasy, Archimedes' next alleged weapon borders on science fiction. Legend has it that when the Roman ships anchored at a safe distance, out of reach of the catapults and the terrifying claws, Archimedes decided to attack them using the power of the sun itself. He supposedly arranged a series of highly polished bronze, or copper mirrors, using pure geometry. Archimedes calculated the exact focal point required to concentrate the sun's rays onto a single, distant target. He aimed the mirrors at the Roman fleet. The intense, focused sunlight hit the dry wood and pitch of the Roman ships. Within minutes, the temperature spiked, and the ships burst into flames in the middle of the ocean. No arrows, no fireballs, just pure weaponized light. For centuries, historians and scientists have debated whether this death ray actually existed. Many claimed it was mathematically and physically impossible. However, modern experiments, including tests by students at MIT, have shown that under the right weather conditions, a perfectly aligned system of mirrors can indeed ignite wood. Whether it was practical in the chaos of a battle remains a mystery. But if anyone in the ancient world had the brain power to calculate the focal point and pull it off, it was definitely Archimedes. The siege of Syracuse dragged on for 2 agonizing years. The mighty Roman army could not defeat a single mathematician. In the end, it was not a failure of math that doomed Syracuse, but failure of men. In 212 BC, during a festival for the goddess Artemis, the city's guards grew careless and drank too much wine. A Roman sympathizer opened a small gate, and the Roman army quietly flooded in. General Marcellus, who had developed a deep, fearful respect for his genius adversary, issued a strict order to his men. Capture Archimedes alive. Do not harm him. As the city burned and soldiers looted the streets, a Roman legionnaire burst into Archimedes' house. He found the 75-year-old mathematician sitting quietly on the floor, deeply engrossed in a geometric diagram he had drawn in the dust. The soldier loudly ordered Archimedes to follow him to the general, but Archimedes, annoyed at the interruption, waved his hand without even looking up. He uttered his legendary last words, "Do not disturb my circles." Enraged by the old man's perceived disrespect, the ignorant soldier drew his sword and struck him down. The greatest mind of the ancient world bled out over his own beautiful equations. When Marcellus heard the tragic news, he was devastated. He buried Archimedes with full military honors. On his tomb, per Archimedes' own prior request, there was no mention of the terrifying weapons he had built. Instead, the tomb was inscribed with his proudest mathematical discovery, a cylinder circumscribing a sphere, representing the beautiful 2-to-3 ratio of their volumes. Archimedes was dead, but he changed the world forever. He proved that mathematics was not just a collection of abstract thoughts for philosophers in togas. It was a tangible, overwhelming force that governed reality. He was the man who turned geometry into a weapon and single-handedly made an empire tremble. Look at the cranes building our skyscrapers, the ships navigating our oceans, and the satellites orbiting our planet. Every time humanity uses physics to bend the world to our will, we are just walking the footsteps of the man who defended his city with nothing but a brilliant mind.